strategy and planning are the same thing. That is absolutely not true, and I'm going to talk you through why that is. Hello and welcome to Engage and Thrive, also known as EAT, your coffee catch-up with me, your host, Taelon, where we will go through common problems and hurdles that come up in business, marketing and advertising and try and demystify them. I know firsthand how complicated and confusing it can seem with all the different acronyms and all the things to do in business. So let me try and help you be better in business. First things first, let's start with grabbing a coffee. To give you the simplest form of understanding the difference between strategy and planning, think about it as strategy is the vision and planning is the action. So then if we use this as an example, strategy is the destination and planning is the journey of how you're going to get there. And we'll go through all of this a lot more in the takeaways of differentiating the two. But really, to understand why it's important of understanding the differences, is because strategy provides the focus and the guidance, and then the planning is what's executed or translated into actionable steps. And without strategy, then planning becomes aimless, and without planning, strategy is just a dream. So I will say is basically throughout my career, what I've noticed is that typically, myself included and other people, you're normally stronger at one or the other, and it takes time and effort and craft to really be able to nail both strategy and planning. But if you think about this as an example, typically a business would have a CEO who holds the vision for a company, and then there would be a COO who is responsible for actually executing that vision and all the day-to-day behind it. The same being said, far too many startups have founders who believe they can do everything. And I say this from experience too, having done it myself and also seen so many founders. Founders are really good at having a vision, and typically in a startup, they'll have an idea and it's really great, but then they're not always good at understanding how to actually execute the idea. And that can be a weakness in a business because they're trying to be strategic and be the operational planning side of things. As always, let's go through vocab. So the first one is strategy, which is your high-level framework guiding your goals and your vision. The next one is planning. So that's your detailed steps and timelines for executing your strategy. The next one is goals. So this would be the results you're aiming to achieve. Another one is tactics. So this is specific actions. For example, we're going to use Instagram Reels for engagements. Again, we'll go into this further in takeaways. Another one that comes up frequently is KPIs, so key performance indicators. So the metrics you're going to track for progress. Example, email open rates, percentage conversion, etc. Another one is contingency planning. So this is your backup plans. What's your fallback if you need to pivot? And again, we'll go through this in the takeaways, what that means and how you actually decide on that. And the final one that would come up with planning is around your project management style. So as a business or as a company, or if you're using an agency, it's good to identify upfront what project management style you want to follow for your plans. And this would be examples are agile, waterfall, Prince 2. You may hear people also saying with an agile scrum, etc. It basically just means what type of plan and sign off stages you want for your plan. And again, this may depend on if you are a startup or if you're a large corporate, if your CEO needs to be involved, etc. So today we're actually going to go through 5 key takeaways. There's quite a lot to cover off, so I'm going to try and do a whistle-stop tour of things to understand the difference between strategy and planning, and hopefully that will then help you to do a better strategic plan. And again, we'll go through that in the bonus content. Number 1, scope. So strategy is your long-term goals and planning is your detailed short-term goals. So if you think about strategy being long-term, you would really be thinking about where do you want your business to be in the next 3 to 5 years? To give you an example, our goal is to dominate the eco-friendly fashion market in the UK by creating sustainable, affordable products, okay? That's a massive vision. That's a great idea. Like we said, strategy is the ideas, it's the vision. And so strategy would really define what does success look like, what are the big goals you're trying to achieve, and what you'll be focusing on to achieve that. Now, if we use that same example with planning, planning is then your short-term details of executing this. So the plan then breaks this all down into smaller iterations and versions of, so how are we going to get there in the next 3 to 5 years? And what do we need to do to be in the UK market and affordable products? What does all of that mean? So to use that example, to support the eco-friendly goal, we'll launch a recycled fabric line this quarter and target influencers with a campaign in March. So the planning in this actually brings the structure to the vision and the roadmap of how you're going to do it. Number 2, focus. So strategy answers your what and why, and planning answers your how and when, which again we touched on lightly on number 1. So if you think about addressing your what and why, your what is your primary focus, and your why is it important to the business. So for example, targeting eco-conscious consumers because sustainability is growing as a key purchasing factor. So really your what and your why. Then your planning is your how and your when. So planning to go into your timelines, your budgets, your actions. For example, creating a launch project plan and weekly check-ins with each team. So whether it's your marketing team, whether it's your sales team, to know how it's actually going. Setting your focus to deliver that vision. Number 3, purpose. So the purpose of a strategy is to align the business, and the planning would then be taking that alignment of the purpose and turning it into goals of action. As we're covering off, you can see the theme. So if your strategy and understanding as a business, it guides every department and team and decision you make, because you all know what you're aiming for. You all know the vision. You all know where you're going for. By having that really upfront, transparent with all departments and everyone in the business, it makes sure that you don't deviate, and it avoids confusion about the goal and the purpose, why we're doing this. And so when things come up, it's easier to make those decisions because it goes back to, is it aligned with the purpose, the strategy we're trying to execute? On this, before we even go into the planning part, I covered off an episode before about how to actually decide about your priorities. And this kind of comes in nicely into the strategy side of the purpose of deciding how you pick those priorities of what to do next, which will then help in your planning, because your planning is turning those high level goals into measurable action steps. Okay. So to give you an example, if our strategy was to increase brand awareness as an industry leader, the plan would be, let's create an action plan to launch an email campaign targeting 10,000 new subscribers by Q2. And you may even go a bit further and say, we want to target 10,000 founders of startups because we want to be industry leaders, knowing that we can give advice for founders. Number 4, flexibility. So flexibility of a strategy evolves with market changes, and planning takes immediate changes into account and immediate needs. So for example, if there are platform changes, that's not something that would have come up in your strategy. You don't know that Google's going to launch a new algorithm. You don't know that blue sky is going to explode over X from a strategy point, but from a planning point, you need to be able to pivot based on what's happening now, but still aligning with the strategy. So the strategy will always hold the long term, and it will remain adaptable, obviously, to market changes, and so should your approach. But it's keeping you going on that vision, the purpose, but with iterations of flexibility. Whereas your planning, being short-term and easier to update, is more tactical. So for example, if you use an influencer and the influencer didn't work as you'd hoped, and it's not kind of achieving the goals you wanted, you would still be aiming for your same reach, your same vision, your same target demographic, but go, actually, let's pivot and let's rather do some Google ads. So you're still changing tactic, but staying with the long-term strategy, right? To give you an example, this is a really nice place where having a contingency plan and having a contingency budget is really, really helpful. One of my favorite things by having a contingency budget, it means that you can pivot and you're not locked in and set on doing certain things. But also you can do reactionary campaigns. So if you know your target audience really well and you know your strategy that you want to do, and then something happens, a press release about a company and it's a bad press release about them, and you want to then utilize that, or a location change or anything like that, you can then use this contingency budget to do a reactionary campaign. Again, the shorter term need for the longer term strategy. So you're still staying flexible and you're still all aligned to the strategy, but your planning is a lot more flexible than your longer term strategy. And finally, number 5, decision making. So this again comes into the project management style, picking priorities. Again, I mentioned it earlier and I will link that episode in the show notes. So your strategy guides your priorities, whereas your planning actually ensures the day-to-day execution of those priorities. So your strategy helps prioritize what to focus on and what to ignore. For example, if your CEO suddenly said, should we expand internationally? And you know that your strategy is to dominate the UK market. Well, no, the answer is very, very easy. No, let's not focus on anything internationally until we've dominated the UK market based on whatever metric you set initially up front for that. By having that clear decision-making process and that strategy up front and identified, it makes it really easy to say no, which can be really hard, especially if you're doing marketing or business strategy. It can be really, really hard to not want to just jump on every trend, or you're seeing something and you think, oh, this could work. If it doesn't align with your strategy, and you follow your decision-making process of your strategy, it's a simple no. So to use that as an example as well. So if we're saying, no, we don't want to go internationally and we're looking to dominate the UK market, the planning side with your daily tasks and your resources that you're going to allocate for dominating the UK market. So for example, instead of just saying, okay, so as a plan, we need more sales, you would then say, right, we already have a presence in the UK. We already have existing customers. How can we utilize that existing customer base to build in it? So do we want to launch a refer a friend campaign so our existing customers can refer people in their network? Or do we want to offer a comeback offer because people purchased maybe like 1 to 2 years ago and they could purchase again? That's the planning side of the strategy, being let's dominate the UK market. So the final piece, I suppose, that is a bonus kind of comment, is what you will hear mentioned more often than not is people saying, let's strategically plan. Okay, this is not to be confused. There is still a difference between strategy and planning, but strategically planning is kind of combining both. So you combine the direction of strategy and the execution of planning into a proper process. Again, like I said in the beginning, it is quite hard to kind of nail both strategy and planning. So when people say strategically plan, don't just think, okay, well, we'll do a strategy and we'll just kind of like plot it out there and let's hope that works. No, you still need to follow the processes of what is a strategy and what is a plan. But so merging those two is actually then the decisions you're making about your strategy, you're kind of like rolling into your plan process at the same time and evolving it. And typically strategic planning kind of happens if you're more agile and flexible, and again with like project management style, and not needing big longer term sign-offs or like waiting 2 quarters for a budget review and planning that far in advance. Strategic planning, you need a bit more fluidity. That isn't necessarily a word. You need to be more fluid, and it needs to be more flexible and more agile. I'm not overusing the word agile. It is a project management style. It basically just means iteration. So typically in tech startups or just tech in general, agile is used because you can just do iterations of delivery. And so you can do strategic planning easier than a lot of corporates where you may need a longer process for sign off. But with all of that said, even with strategic planning, the biggest thing to remember is just to make sure that everyone understands what the strategy, what the vision is, and then the actual plan is very clear about the steps to actually execute to get to that strategy. Because if you have the strategy set and you don't have that plan in place, like I said in the beginning, then it's just ideas with no execution, or you have a plan with no vision. So it's important that you need to remember these two need to work together in harmony to make the perfect combination. And I'm going to repeat what I said in the beginning. Strategy is vision, planning is action. Strategy is your destination, and planning is your journey of how to get there. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Engage and Thrive with your host Taelon, and see you next week.